Good Monday makers, it's time for another community build roundup. In this week's episode, we're going to be checking out a patio privacy screen and sunshade that doubles as a canopy. We're also going to be looking at a garden enclosure that does something very similar. We're also going to be checking out a trailer enclosure for a motorcycle, an adjustable van awning, and a chicken tractor. All kinds of awesome builds as always. And remember, even if you're not making any of these specific builds, you can still learn some techniques and awesome things that you can incorporate into whatever it is that you are making. With that said, let's jump into today's builds. First up is this awesome shade and privacy screen that kind of converts and can be adjusted between the two. This comes from Lance, and this is fantastic. First, you can see here in this first image, he shared some dimensions of his porch, the conduit needed, and some different things like the shade size, which is just really awesome information. You can check that out and see if it matches your space that you're working in. You might can just copy this design and this framework and make the same measurements and cuts that he did, which would be fantastic. Super cool. Thanks for sharing that, Lance. And then if we go through to the next image, we can see here, we can start seeing this frame come together. And here he's kind of showcasing the hinge. And we'll talk about that technique here as we see the frame. And we can go ahead and just kind of talk about the frame here as we can see. We got a good view of it at this angle. And basically he achieved the hinge by doing adjustable angle flanges up here attached to the underside of the roof here. Just adjustable angle flanges. He left those loose, which allows him to basically swing the frame back and forth, which is just really cool. And then the rest of the framework is pretty simple. He used maker pipe T connectors here and also in these three connections down here. So that's 3 adjustable angle flanges and then 4 maker pipe T connectors. And then he used the 180 degree connector here in the middle, and that just allows you to have that pipe that runs, and then you have one that comes in on each side. And this is kind of in privacy mode or shade mode, whatever you want to call it, where it's basically flat and kind of sits flush in this rectangular space here for the patio. But then if we go through and look at his photos, we can see here's some other shots of the frame, which is cool. But then we can see it here. He's got the sunshade attached, and he's using a combination of ball bungees and zip ties. I see some ball bungees there on the ground as well as some zip ties. So he's using a combination of both to secure this. And I think he might even have some lights secured to the frame, or maybe those are just secured to the patio in different places. But nonetheless, really cool. This is kind of privacy screen mode, and some people only build this part of it. They just want this screen that shades them while they're eating outdoors, and that you can do that, and you don't have to use the adjustable angle flanges. You could use the rigid flange and just mount this, straight up and down in that mode. But he wanted this to function as a canopy also, as we can see here, which is fantastic. And because it rotates, because of the adjustable angle flanges, he just rotates it up and then adds these legs. We don't really see exactly how he does this, but I'm pretty sure it's just as simple as he said he has guests, that come over and he wants to make this into a canopy. Basically, he just walks up and, maker pipe connections can be put together with a 5mm hex wrench. Basically, just adds a T connector on each side of the frame and then just adds, the vertical post that goes down to the ground in each of those T connectors, and basically just adds that those legs to turn this into a canopy, which is really simple. And we'll see another build here coming up soon that you could actually incorporate another technique to make the legs hinge up into the frame. So we'll look at that here soon. But this is really awesome, Lance. Thanks so much for sharing this. A lot of great details and just a great idea overall. So thanks for posting this. We really appreciate it. Next up is this fantastic enclosure from Steve. And like I said, this is very similar in design to the previous build, and we'll see why here in a second. But this is a garden enclosure. You can see he's got woods in the background. He said that deer love to come out of the woods and take advantage of this free buffet they have laid out for them. So he wanted to build a deer-proof garden enclosure, and this is what he came up with. And it looks pretty standard right now. This is like a standard box enclosure that we see from community members pretty often. Just enclosure with material around it to protect the garden. But a question that gets asked is, okay, what if I build this enclosure? How do I get back into the garden to be able to get stuff out, work in the garden? And what Steve came up with was awesome. You can see here, this is the same enclosure, except the sides are flipped up. Now he's got all this access to the garden, and he did it pretty easily with just a couple of connectors and a great technique for hinging sides like this. You can see he's got the main design of the rectangle with just the 4 verticals that go up, starting in the corners, those 4 verticals, and just kind of made the main rectangle with that. He said that the actual build is anchored in the ground with concrete, and he used 90-degree connectors he used 8 total of those in the corners to make this main box. And that's kind of the most important part, just making this main frame first. But you can see the verticals extend through the 90-degree connector in the corners and go up a little bit. And we'll look closer at the design here in a second. But this is the main frame design, just using those 8 90-degree connectors. Then he also added some angled bracing with 45-degree connectors. And he added 2, 4, 6, 8 of those. So 8 90s and 8 45-degree connectors so far. And if we go on to the next photo, we can see here kind of a closer look of it folded down. And we'll go back at this for a second, and we can look at the sides and see how they're constructed too. But it's basically just the top of the vertical. There is a connection that we'll look at closer here in a moment. But then he just made another rectangle that comes off of this, and he just used T connectors to make this rectangle. And then this pole that goes down actually adjusts, and we'll look at that here closer in a second. But like I said, he just has the vertical extending up a little farther, and then he grabs onto those verticals with, we'll see here, adjustable angle connectors, those right there. And that, just like the adjustable angle flange, you can leave those loose and hinge them. So basically this is just connected at the top of the vertical. We can see where it extends through the 90 there. And then he attached the rectangular panels and kind of built those off of this adjustable angle connector, and then used some 45 degrees we can see there for bracing. And basically that's as simple as it is to make those folding panels. Just at the top of the 4 verticals, add an adjustable angle connector and kind of build out the rest of those rectangular sides, add some bracing in there. And then we can see that he actually hinges these here. Now you can do hinges with T connectors in a couple ways. You can take off, there's a friction band. If you remove, you can swivel the T connector. I don't think he did that here though. I think he actually used a hack for this. I think it's made so he used threaded pipe inserts kind of stacked, which is kind of elaborate and a little complex, but basically stacked threaded pipe inserts, and has a short stub of conduit that rotates. I'm pretty sure that's how he did it. If you're watching, Steve, I'd love to know. But you could do that in a couple of different ways. Like I said, you could just rely, the connectors rely on friction, so you could just kind of force them to rotate, and you could remove the friction band to make that a little easier. But really great idea. And just an awesome project, for this kind of thing for an enclosure. And it's kind of similar to the first project we looked at, but this is just really awesome, Steve. Thanks so much for sharing it. Awesome project. Next up is a trailer enclosure, and this comes from Randy. You can see here he's got this flatbed trailer, and he wanted to build a framework to protect his motorcycle. And this is pretty elaborate, so we're not going to really dive deep into the connectors, but we can see it's a really elaborate framework that mounts to the trailer. And it looks like he probably drilled through the wood pieces there that fit inside those slots. Probably used threaded pipe inserts to basically bolt from the bottom of the trailer up into the conduit. If I had to guess, that's what I would say he did. Not entirely sure. He didn't really mention it, at least from what I saw. But we can see the rest of the framework here. It's pretty complex. There's a lot of archways and a lot of connections. We can see a lot of bends. He probably used the handheld pipe and tube bender. It looks like mostly T connectors I see for the framework. And then he also, it looks like, used some crossover clamps in a few different places, like here is a crossover clamp. He also used, it looks like, a 180-degree connector. Like I mentioned earlier, that just has the one in the middle and then the 2 that come in, one from each side. See, like I said, a lot of T connectors and then just a lot of complex bends. This is fantastic, really cool project, and basically wanted to make this to protect his motorcycle on the trailer. And it looks like he covered it with a nice material. I imagine that's like a weatherproof, it looks like plastic, probably like tarp material. And it actually has a zippered door, which is really cool, and just a really great project for protecting his motorcycle. Like I said, pretty elaborate and not a super common project that we see, but really awesome nonetheless, and we really appreciate you sharing that, Randy. Thanks so much for sending that in. Next up is an adjustable van awning, and this was shared by John. This is really cool. You can see here, basically they have this awning that they add to the side of their van, and it looks like they have some kind of rack already mounted on their van. As you can see here, we can kind of zoom in and see there's some kind of rack already on the van, some kind of bracket, and it looks like the T connector is attached inside of that bracket somehow. I know that there is a clamp that you can get for like unistrut. I'm not sure if it's something like that. Don't really see exactly how it's mounted to the roof, but this is just made to be put up temporarily. So, you could do that in a number of ways. But then it's just a pretty simple rectangular frame like we've seen from previous builds in this episode, where basically they just use T connectors to make this main rectangle. And if you're making a 2D, two-dimensional rectangle, T connectors are the way to go, because you just have the pipes that come out of it, one from one side to the other, T connector there, and then you just kind of repeat that all the way around, T connector in that corner, same there. You just kind of go all the way around. So, 4 T connectors to make a simple rectangle. And then he did something pretty interesting for the legs. It looks like these are made with, it looks like he used 3/4 to 1/2 inch. He used the 3/4 to 1/2 inch telescoping clamp, as you can see there. So he can adjust the height of this leg. And then the very top is unique. I have no idea exactly why he did it this way. I think it was just to make an easy leg. But basically, it's just a 3/4 inch piece that goes up in the middle, that goes up from the ground. That's the adjustable piece we just saw. And then he has 2 more pieces of 3/4 inch kind of on the outside of that one. And it looks like those are just electrical taped together. And that just kind of secures all 3 together. And that just kind of squeezes around the conduit. I could be butchering that, but I'm pretty sure that's what he did. And like I said, it's made to just be put up temporarily and quickly, and made to be adjustable. So he made those legs and then secured the sunshade with the ball bungees, as we can see, going around the shade there, which is just really cool and a really great project for a quick and easy adjustable awning. So thanks so much for sharing that, John. Awesome project. Last but not least is another fantastic project. This one comes from Catherine, and this is another one that is really elaborate. There's a lot of connectors. She actually mentioned that in the post. She said that she probably could have saved a lot of money by bending some of these connections or some of these corners and things as opposed to using connectors, because you can see it's pretty laid out with a ton of connectors there. See all kinds of different connections being used for T connectors, adjustable angle. We got the peak of the roof, I think is 135-degree connectors. And then once you actually get inside of the chicken tractor, we can see even more things were being used. There's the back side of it. Then she shared some photos of the feeding method that they found, which is really cool. But we can see there's all kinds of connections, a ton of accessories added to this. And something I did want to highlight with this is the way they're actually rolling this around. So you might not notice at first glance, but you can see down here that there is a set of wheels. I think there's 3 total sets of wheels. We got one down here, one over here, and I think there's one in the back. And she said they took apart a stroller for one of them, and then the other 2 are made with our lawnmower wheels. And basically, we can see these are the different photos. Here's the one on the back. And then she basically used crossover clamps to secure lawnmower wheels to the frame, the 3/4 inch conduit that she used for the framework, which is really clever, and allowed her to basically make this, and they can just lift up the handles and roll this around. Said it's not the easiest thing to steer, but it's not really a problem because they have a big yard, which is awesome. And basically you can see that secured there, which is just a really cool and clever technique. And then you can see here they made kind of a barrier on the outside, and they connected the T connectors with PVC. I was wondering why it was bending so much there, but it's because it's PVC. So basically they made this extra fence just to kind of keep things from digging underneath. They said it might be overkill, but just trying to keep out foxes and different things, which is a good idea if you got chickens. But just a really great project and just really cool. We can see that it's basically just, kind of your classic style where it's got the peaked roof, and then they've got tarp on the back side, and then on the front and the rest of the build, they've got It looks like, I think they said half-inch square critter fence secured with zip ties. Just a really cool build, really awesome. Thanks so much, Catherine, for sharing this. And thanks to everybody for posting your projects. As always, we love seeing them. If you want to check any of these out in more detail, they'll be linked down below. If you like this video, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. Thanks so much, guys, for watching. We'll see you in the next one.